Hello everybody, this video really is going to be about Edward and Simpson, but I came across one of these pictures of Marilyn Monroe and Jackie O, and I actually do think they are the same person. I know it's hard for you to get your head around, just different makeup, different coloured hair, it definitely changes you. Anyway, that's what I thought. I thought they're so alike. But this video is really going to be about Edward and Simpson. So, he was king, but he was never coronated because of this association with Wallis. But he did do duties and he did do things. But in their world, in their game thing. In fact, when I was watching a bit of video about him, he cannot stop fiddling with his hands and his fingers. He's like a nervous wreck. And it's almost like he wants to say things and he just doesn't say them. Yeah, that's what I hear. There's a little bit of information about what they're saying. He died in 1972, she died in about 14 years later. I don't think he lived here though. I think he was sort of sent away from here really after his abdicating. Anyway, you can find quite a lot of stuff, memorabilia for the coronation that wasn't. And obviously they're selling those on eBay. Coins, flags, tea towels, throws, many mugs. It says after ruling just under a year, he abdicated. But he was getting ready to be crowned king. But they said he wanted to marry Wallis, and so they didn't want him to. Which, you know, when you think that it's all a game, yeah. Because he didn't have any children, the Queen would have been Queen now anyway. She'd have just been Queen later on. Because he didn't have any children. But anyway, there's a little bit of information about him there. Scandalous, scandalous, scandalous. There are many pictures of her and him when you go through the internet. Many, many pictures. But he never, I don't know, he never looks right, really, on any of it. And I was reading, actually, that he there was other women, but in the end he got left with her and she wanted money. Well, I don't think she just married him for money, because it's a game, isn't it? It's all a story, it was all put together. She's as tall as him in most of the pictures. Her head's as big as his. But many pictures of them together. Supposedly, he brought her to a function and introduced her to his mum. But his mum didn't know that she was going to be there, and supposedly the Queen, or his mum, was not very happy. Another one with a not very, I don't know, look at his teeth, I don't know. That picture, they weren't together. It's another one of those. That was not together picture. just on my hunt round, looking at pictures, loads of pictures of them. Whether they're together or not in all of them, I haven't checked, but yeah, many pictures. Many pictures I took. A few newspaper articles. That doesn't even look like him, does it? Obviously she married him. The only thing I could find is it was relating her really to Meghan Markle. But when you look up, he had blue eyes. He's got blue eyes. In all the pictures like this and the paintings, he's got blue eyes. See? Blue eyes. When you look at this, he's got blue eyes. He has blue eyes. There you go. Blue eyes. Blue eyes. Blue eyes. Blue eyes. Blue eyes. Blue. So in this footage, when they're showing him with brown eyes, I can't believe it, and I actually think, you know, it gets a tiny bit blurry when you zoom in, but you can see he's got brown eyes. When you look around him, it's the same thing going on here. See, brown eyes. The same thing that's going on here, that's going on with the Watts case, with Boris, with Biden, with Trump. I mean, that eye is very strange. His left eye, but right eye to us. His eye is really weird, and I realised that the same thing was going on in this footage as is going on with the others. The same thing was going on here. I mean, just look at him. That's supposed to be him. And those hands, and he's always fiddling with his hands. Same thing goes on here, like in the other videos. I actually think they're better at doing it then than they are now, because none of us noticed, but it's not right. I'm sorry. Same thing, you know, like I've been doing with all the new, you know, the later videos with Trump and Boris. The same thing is going on here. This was done in the late 60s, I think 1969. But it's the same thing going on here in the footage. None of my dog's snoring under the table. None of it's real. It's not real. Got the same problems going on here, but unfortunately when you zoom in a little bit, it's going to make it a little bit blurry, and like the chair was always moving. It's not real. very disappointing. Because when you actually listen to what he says, he's saying something else. So let's put on what he says.
Would you describe yourself as a reforming king when you occupied the throne?
No, I wouldn't. I wanted to be an up-to-date king. That was... But I didn't have much time to...
No, and you didn't have, as it were, you didn't have political conceptions about how the country should be.
I had lots of political conceptions, but I kept them to myself. That is the tradition of the royal family.
What were the things that you wanted to change? Could you give me some examples of the ways in which you ran up against the conventions of your time?
Well, I think it was more... well, I wasn't there. I didn't have time. I wasn't there long enough. But I had in mind to change, especially to do with the court, which, after all, the court is dominated by the king, and he influences the court and gives the orders. It's his command, so to speak.
Do you think there's too much court life nowadays?
No, I don't think there is, because they've simplified it a great deal. I've seen very little of it, but from what I hear, and I have been around, been to Britain from time to time, and I think that it's very good now. It's simplified. People haven't got the time for the old ceremonials or lengthy ceremonials that they used to have.
When you were Prince of Wales, you had definite ideas about how you ought to dress. For instance, you didn't want to wear a top hat. You wanted to wear a bowler hat.
My father always wore a top hat, and he was surprised that I wouldn't follow his tradition. But when he didn't have to go around big industrial plants that I did, and go around, which, thank God there are not so many today, but what we used to call the slums. They were really bad in those days.
I remember. At what point did you first become aware of coming into conflict with the government of the day as a result of your different conception of kingship?
Well, actually, that was before I became king. I had a trip organized to go and visit some of the depressed areas. I went to Wales and different parts of Britain, and this one, I think, was up in the Northumberland. And when Stanley Baldwin got to hear of this trip, he called me to the House of Commons and said he'd like to talk to me about it. He said, "Why are you going up there? Got a lot of other important things to do?" So I said, "No, Mr. Baldwin," I said, "I think that it is very important to see how we can't give these people unemployment. Some of them have been out for 10 years. Now, Mr. Baldwin suddenly became conscious of the fact that he and his government had actually done very little to alleviate the plight of the unemployed, of which there were thousands at that time. So he said, "Who suggested that you should go?" I said, "As a matter of fact, I'm going under the auspices of Sir Alexander Leith, who was chairman of the Conservative Association in Northumberland." "Oh," he said, "wonderful man, great friend of mine. I'm delighted, and I do hope that you will have a good trip." When I left he was Prime Minister at that time, I thought to myself that he was beginning to drag me in to politics a little too far. And as we all know, politics is the one thing that the royal family has to avoid, even however much they might like to express their opinions.
There was another occasion when you were going to visit some area in which there was a great deal of poverty and unemployment, and they wanted to take you round in a Rolls Royce.
Yes.
But you
I didn't
refused to
think
go.
that was a suitable vehicle for that trip, and I upset one of the dignitaries who met me there. Had his Rolls Royce for me to get in. I said, I'm sorry, I'm not going to ride in that. And he was very upset and thought that I was letting him down, I think, more than letting my position down. I went around in an ordinary car and thought it was more suitable.
What was the occasion, sir, when you went to some area of unemployment and poverty, and you were reported in the newspapers as having said it was damnable and something ought to be done about it?
Oh, I think that it could be almost anywhere. South Wales or... I really saw some terrible things when you look back. Those days of the 20s and early 30s, well, really until this last World War.
Did you try and do something about those conditions?
There wasn't very much that I could do, except to bring it to the notice, we say, of the government in power. At one occasion, I was as Prince of Wales. I had a large, some of the Duchy of Cornwall. There was a big real estate property in Kennington, and one or two people in the city of London, wealthy people, got interested and said, we'll like to put some money up to develop this, tear down the slums and build a housing estate. We got an architect. We had a meeting where I lived at York House in St. James's Palace. And I think that the chairman of the London County Council at that time was Herbert Morrison. So we had this meeting, and I think afterwards we had either a cup of tea break, or a drink. And when he was leaving, Mr. Morrison was just getting into his car, and he came back. He said, "Oh my God!" He said, "I've left my briefcase in the dining room where we were sitting." He said, "I can't leave the socialist secrets in this house." So I said, "Mr. Morrison, they're perfectly safe here."
But you didn't get much change.
No. The London County Council did not wish this group, private enterprise group, to get the credit for having built this housing scheme, which actually we could have done very much cheaper than the London County Council did.
You've mentioned one or two statesmen of your lifetime, sir. You mentioned Baldwin. What about some of the others now? How did you get on with Lloyd George?
I got on fine with him. He was a very colourful, wonderful man. He taught me very few words of Welsh that I had to speak at the time of my investiture at Carnarvon in 1911.
What kind of dealings did you have with Winston Churchill?
Oh, Winston was a great friend of mine. I knew Winston first when he was First Lord of the Admiralty in Liberal government in 1910 or 11. And we kept very close touch even while he was in power.
Did Winston Churchill give you any help with your speeches?
Yes, after the punctuation of the phraseology and so forth, and he said a very good way at a public dinner is to put a finger bowl down, and then you put a plate over the finger bowl, and then you put a glass on the plate, and then you put your notes on the glass. But he said, don't do what I did once and knock the glass over.
You remember your father advised you not to put jokes into speeches.
Yes. His old secretary, Lord Stamford, I asked him to help me with a speech, and he put in quite an amusing little paragraph, which had a great success in the audience. Some public dinner, I guess, it must have been. And my father read this speech, sent for me, and he said, I'm very surprised that you made those rather flippant remarks in your speech to this association. He said, I've never made a joke in a speech. Well, I thought that perhaps he probably lost a good deal and hadn't pleased his audiences as much as those who can get a laugh out of them. And you could always get a laugh out of an audience early, and you can say the serious things afterwards.